The sun was slowly rising above the wide Arizona desert, spreading a soft golden light over the land. It was the kind of morning when the air was still cool and quiet, and the only sounds were the calls of birds and the soft wind moving through the dry grass. Far from the busy towns there stood a small Apache village made of simple homes built from wood, clay, and earth. Life in the village moved at its own slow rhythm. People worked together, shared food, and looked out for one another. Among the villagers was a young girl named Alina. She was about 16 years old, with long black hair that fell down her back and eyes that held a quiet kind of strength. Alina had grown up in this village since she was a child, but she always felt like she didn't truly belong. She wasn't loud like the other girls, and she didn't laugh as easily as they did. She liked to spend time alone, sitting on a small hill outside the village watching the horizon. She found peace in silence and beauty in simple things, like the way the sun touched the sand, or the way a single flower grew even in a dry place. But inside her heart, Alina carried a quiet sadness. Many of the girls in her village were already married or had someone who wanted to marry them. They had plans for their future, families waiting to grow. Alina, however, didn't. The other young people often looked past her as if she wasn't there. Some of the older women said she was too quiet. Others thought she was too different. No one saw the gentle strength in her heart. Not yet. Every evening, when the sun began to set and the sky turned orange and red, people gathered around the fire in the center of the village. They shared stories, laughed, and talked about the day. Alina usually sat at the edge of the circle listening quietly. Sometimes she smiled at the stories. Other times she felt like a small stone on a big path, present but unseen. One evening when the warm glow of the fire wrapped around everyone, Alina overheard two young women talking nearby. Their voices were soft, but their words reached her clearly. "Did you hear?" one said. "Taya is getting married next month." "She's so lucky." "Yes," the other answered, laughing softly. "She always has someone looking at her. It's easy for her." Alina looked down at her hands. A small breeze touched her face, but the warmth in her heart faded a little more. She didn't blame the girls. They were just talking. But their words reminded her of something she tried to forget. She was alone, and no one had ever said they wanted to build a life with her. Later that night, when everyone returned to their homes, Alina walked slowly toward the small hill outside the village. The stars were bright above her, and the moon painted the desert silver. She sat down and hugged her knees close to her chest. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. In that moment, she whispered to herself in a low, trembling voice, "No man wants me." She didn't say it out of anger. She said it out of sadness, like someone letting go of a secret they have held for a long time. The desert around her was silent, but the stars seemed to listen. What Alina didn't know was that someone had heard her soft voice. A man was passing through the village that evening, a cowboy named Thomas. He often traveled between small towns, bringing supplies and helping people when needed. Thomas was not loud or proud like some men who traveled the land. He was quiet, thoughtful, and kind. He believed in treating people with respect, no matter where they came from. Thomas had stopped near the village to give food and water to his horse when he heard the faint sound of Alina's voice carried by the wind. He didn't see her clearly in the dark, but those 4 words, "No man wants me," touched something deep in his heart. He knew the sound of pain when he heard it. He too had once felt like no one saw him for who he truly was. The next morning, the sun rose high and warm. Alina got up early, as she always did, to help the older women gather water. Her feet were light, but her heart still felt heavy. She didn't talk about what she said the night before. She carried it quietly, the way people carry invisible stones in their pockets. But even when she was hurting, she still helped others with kindness. She gave her time, shared food, and smiled at children running by. Meanwhile, Thomas returned to the village with supplies. He often visited to deliver bags of grain, tools, and cloth from nearby towns. The villagers respected him because he never treated anyone as less. When he arrived, some of the men came to greet him and help unload his wagon. Children followed him, curious and playful, while his horse snorted softly in the sunlight. As he handed out the supplies, his eyes searched quietly for the girl whose voice he had heard the night before, and then he saw her, standing a little apart from the others, holding a wooden bucket. Her hair shone in the light and her face was calm, though her eyes looked far away. She didn't seem to notice him at first. She was too busy with her work. Thomas was not the kind of man to speak without thought, so he didn't rush toward her. Instead, he spent the day quietly helping the villagers. But every time he looked in her direction, he noticed how gentle her movements were. She didn't need to speak loudly to be kind. She didn't need to wear fancy clothes to shine. There was something honest and real about her that caught his heart like sunlight catches water. Later that afternoon, while Alina was sitting alone near the water barrels, Thomas walked over slowly. His boots made a soft sound on the ground, and his hat shaded his face from the sun. "Good afternoon," he said gently. Alina looked up, surprised. She didn't expect anyone to talk to her. She nodded politely, unsure what else to say. Thomas smiled not too wide, just enough to show warmth. "I see you work hard," he said. "That's a good thing," Alina blinked. No one had ever said that to her before. People often noticed others, and the louder ones, the brighter ones, but not her. "I just do what I can," she replied softly. Thomas nodded. Sometimes that's what matters most. For the first time in a long while, Alina felt seen. Not for what she didn't have, not for what she wasn't, but for what she truly was. A quiet, strong girl with a kind heart. She didn't know why, but her chest felt a little less heavy that day. In the following days, Thomas visited the village again. He brought supplies, helped fix a fence, and shared small stories from the towns he passed through. The villagers liked him, and children ran to greet him every time he arrived. Alina never expected him to notice her again, but he always did. A kind nod here, a warm smile there. One evening, while the village gathered around the fire, Alina sat at her usual place at the edge of the circle. The fire burned bright and people's laughter filled the air. She didn't join in, but she listened. Thomas stood nearby, talking with some of the older men. When his eyes met hers across the firelight, something quiet and warm passed between them. For the first time, Alina didn't feel like a small stone on the path. She felt like part of the light. She still carried the same heart, the same quiet nature, but something was beginning to change inside her. A new feeling, small but steady, grew like a seed in the sand. It wasn't about falling in love yet. It was about being seen, being valued. And for someone who had spent so many nights whispering to the stars, that was enough to make her world feel different. The next morning, Alina returned to her favorite hill at sunrise. The desert stretched endlessly before her. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and closed her eyes. The wind brushed her hair gently, almost like a friend. She didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, the thought didn't scare her. In the distance, she heard the soft sound of horse hooves. Thomas was riding through again. He didn't rush toward her or speak loudly. He just passed by and lifted his hat in greeting. She gave a small, shy smile in return. It wasn't a big moment, no one else even noticed it. But for Alina, it felt like the beginning of something new, something warm. Days passed, and Alina slowly began to change without even realizing it. She smiled more, not because someone told her to, but because her heart felt a little lighter. When she helped the older women, her steps felt easier. When she listened to the stories around the fire, she didn't feel so far away. She didn't know what Thomas truly thought of her, and she didn't need to know yet. What mattered was that someone saw her, really saw her. And Thomas. Every time he visited the village, he looked for her first. Not in a hurried way, but in the way someone looks at something precious. Carefully, gently, and with quiet respect. On the night when the stars shone the brightest, Alina sat on her hill once more. This time when she looked at the sky, she didn't whisper the same words she once did. Her heart was still shy, still unsure, but it held something new. Hope. And hope, as small as it may seem, has a way of changing everything. The sun was soft and golden that morning, spreading its light over the wide open desert. It touched the sand, the hills, the village roofs, and finally reached Alina's small hill where she often sat in silence. Life had changed little by little, though no one else could see how deeply the change had grown inside her. She still woke up early to help gather water, still sat quietly at the fire in the evenings, but now her heart no longer carried the same heavy weight. Thomas had become a quiet but steady presence in the village. He never came to make a big show of himself. He came with kindness, simple words, and the sort of calm that made even the wind seem to slow down. Each visit felt a little more familiar, like a page turning softly in a storybook. And Alina, though shy, began to meet his eyes a little longer, smile a little more, and speak a little louder when he was near. It started with small moments. A shared greeting, a few words about the weather, a laugh when a child ran between them and almost knocked over a basket of apples. These moments were like tiny pieces of sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. Neither of them said anything about it, but both felt the warm thread quietly weaving between their lives. One afternoon, Thomas arrived with more than his usual supplies. He brought colorful cloth, handmade cups, and small gifts from a nearby town. The children ran around his horse, laughing as they tried to peek into the wagon. Alina stood near the well, watching him with curious eyes. She wasn't sure why he came so often, but his presence made the air feel lighter. Thomas noticed her from across the courtyard. He didn't rush. He walked over slowly, as he always did. When he stood in front of her, his kind smile appeared again. "I brought something," he said softly. Alina tilted her head. "For the village?" she asked. Thomas nodded. "Yes, but also for you." Her eyes widened a little. She had never been given a gift before, not like this. From his pocket, Thomas carefully pulled out a small scarf, light blue with tiny flowers sewn into it. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was beautiful in a quiet, gentle way. Alina touched the fabric with her fingertips, unsure what to say. "For me?" she whispered. Thomas nodded again. "I saw it in the town. It reminded me of someone who is kind and strong but doesn't always see how special she is." Her cheeks grew warm. She had no words to answer, but the feeling in her chest said everything. For years she had felt invisible, and now here was someone who saw her clearly. She carefully folded the scarf and held it close like a small treasure. From that day on, Alina's heart began to believe something it had never believed before, that she was worthy of love and kindness. She didn't know what the future held, but she no longer feared it. Over time, Thomas and Alina began to spend more moments together. They walked near the edge of the village in the evenings, talking about simple things: the stars, the wind, the animals, the dreams they carried in quiet corners of their hearts. Alina told him how she used to sit on the hill as a child and imagine a life where she belonged. Thomas shared how he had traveled from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. One night, under a clear sky filled with stars, Thomas finally spoke what had been growing in his heart. His voice was gentle like the wind. "Alina," he said, "I've seen many places in my life. I've met many people, but no one has ever felt as honest to me as you do. You don't have to pretend to be anyone else. You are enough." Alina's eyes filled with soft emotion. She had dreamed of hearing words like that, but never truly expected them. "I have nothing to offer," she said quietly. "I'm just me." Thomas smiled, the way someone smiles when they already know the answer. "That's all I want." After that night, Thomas spoke to the village elders. He wanted to make sure that his intentions were understood. He was a traveler, yes, but he wasn't here for a short stay. He had found something here, someone that gave him a reason to build a life. The elders respected him. They had seen how gently he treated Alina and how much kindness he brought to their people. After careful talks and quiet nods, they gave their blessing. Alina didn't expect anything grand. She didn't imagine a celebration, but what she did feel was something deeper: safety. She had spent so many nights thinking no one wanted her, and now someone had not only chosen her but also respected her, cared for her, and stood beside her with quiet strength. On a soft spring morning, Thomas came to the hill where Alina always sat. The desert wind played with the edge of his hat. Alina turned when she heard his footsteps. "Thomas?" she asked softly. He stopped a few steps away, his smile warm and sure. "I've traveled long enough to know where my heart belongs now," he said. "I want to build a home, and not just a house, but a life. I want you to be part of it if you want the same." For a moment, Alina couldn't speak. The world around her seemed still, like the earth was holding its breath. She looked at the man standing before her. Not a hero from a storybook, not someone larger than life, but someone real, kind, and steady. The kind of person who would never let her feel invisible again. She took a slow breath and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I want that too." The days that followed were simple but beautiful. Thomas fixed up his small ranch at the edge of the desert, a place with a wooden fence, a quiet well, and a wide open sky. Alina brought her calm, her strength, and her gentle heart. Together they built their life piece by piece. It wasn't easy, no real life ever is. But they faced each day side by side with quiet trust. Alina had always been good with the land. She planted flowers around their home, even though the ground was dry and rough. Many people said nothing could grow there, but Alina believed otherwise. She watered the earth every morning, spoke to the plants softly, and watched the small buds grow slowly. One day a single rose bloomed, bright red against the pale sand. It was a small miracle, but to Alina it was a promise. Word of her roses spread through the nearby villages. People came to see the flowers growing in a place where no one thought they could. They called her the woman who grew roses in the desert. But Thomas knew the truth, and the roses were not just flowers. They were Alina's heart, blooming after years of silence. Life on the ranch was simple. Mornings were filled with soft sunlight, the sound of birds, and the smell of bread baking. Thomas took care of the horses and the land. Alina took care of their home, the garden, and the flowers. In the evenings they sat outside looking at the stars together. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. But even in silence they understood each other. Thomas never treated Alina like she needed to change. He loved her exactly as she was, quiet, gentle, strong in her own way. And Alina loved him not for big gestures, but for his quiet heart, his patience, and the way he had seen her when no one else did. Years passed softly, like pages turning in a book. Their home grew, their garden grew, and their bond grew even stronger. Alina often thought about the night she whispered to the stars, "No man wants me." She remembered how small and invisible she felt back then. Now, when she looked at the roses outside her door, she knew that those words no longer belonged to her. She had been wanted, not just for her smile, not for her beauty, but for her soul. Sometimes, young girls from the nearby villages came to visit her. They sat in her garden asking about the flowers, asking about her life. Alina would smile softly and tell them, "Don't hide who you are. Even the quietest heart can bloom in the desert." Thomas would listen from the porch, tipping his hat and smiling with quiet pride. He knew that what they built wasn't made of gold or riches. It was made of kindness, patience, and love that grew slowly but never faded. And when the sun set over the wide desert, painting the sky in warm colors, Alina would sit beside Thomas on the wooden steps of their home. She would rest her head on his shoulder, watching the world turn soft and golden. She didn't need a crown, a crowd, or a big story. Her story was here. In the roses, in the wind, in the man who saw her when no one else did. The world may have once made her feel small. But love, real love, had made her bloom.